Now for a deeper dive into U.S. Middle East economic ties, let's turn to Klisman Murati in London. Klisman is founder of Pareto Economics, a global world affairs research consultancy. He's also creator of Global Power Index. Welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us. And Nathan really covered quite a bit there. But what we saw in D.C. today, an important session at the White House. The meeting between Washington and Qatar comes at a critical time globally. We heard what Nathan had to say about the discussions. Why now, and what do you think the end game is of these bilateral talks?
Look, one thing that we have to realize, Sean, is that the Qatari-U.S. relationship didn't just spring out of nowhere and this meeting is happening. This dialogue has been going on since last year. The strategic dialogue between the two nations was signed in November last year, and this is just the culmination of events happening. Now, Joe Biden is trying to do something very difficult. He's trying to manage the energy crisis in Europe, whilst at the same time managing relations with Russia at such heightened times. And he's trying to pull in all of his allies to help him do this. Now, there's only so much time that he could do this for, because naturally, as the segment mentioned before, a lot of LNG supplies have already been locked up. Supplies have been already promised to other countries. So any excess supply would need to be found not only through Qatar, but through other players like Australia, Canada, and other allies as well, which is going to be very difficult to do.
I really want to go a bit deeper into that, because Qatar's global energy production, while massive, its supplies are not unlimited. Talk to me a little bit more in depth about where so much of their natural gas is tied up right now, and what the hopes are for perhaps the EU and the United States if a crisis should emerge between Ukraine and Russia.
So the two biggest centers of power which require the most energy supply in terms of gas is Europe and also Asia. For almost the same reason, production efforts in both of these regions are hard to do themselves, so they must rely on imports. Now, Asia, specifically South Korea and other parts of Asia, Japan, China not so much because they produce their own LNG supply, bits of India as well, require, their demand is quite high, and Europe's demand is quite high. And Russia was a very constant supplier of LNG into Europe over the years, but for many different reasons, including COVID and supply chain disruptions, that is no longer the case. Now, the U.S. being a large or the major LNG supplier has been trying to plug that gap into Europe, because demand and supply for Asia has been set over the last few years, and it's only going to continue. So Biden is in a very difficult position where he's reaffirming his relations with Europe and trying to foster some sort of collaboration with allies in order to, again, plug the supply gap, because demand is only going to rise as the winter gets harsher.
Yeah, do you think it's fair for the U.S. and others to put Qatar in this situation, or is it just the way economics and politics come together?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're putting them in a tough position at all, because any demand is good demand, I think, from Qatar's point of view. And Qatar is going to do their best to reaffirm their position as sort of the kingmaker in the Middle East for different issues, and they're going to reaffirm this position by perhaps even asking for concessions from the U.S. or perhaps favorable strategic advantages that they would want to enjoy if they could supply this excess LNG into Europe. So this isn't a case of them burdening Qatar by any way, shape, or form, because this is a natural thing you do in international relations when circumstances like this come along. Sean.
You know, I want to switch and talk about Afghanistan. The U.S. chaotic withdrawal last year led to so many issues in the nation, which are unfortunately playing out in the dead of winter. Qatar has been front and center, trying to first negotiate peace in that area. To what hope can we hope things can take a positive turn with perhaps Qatar and the United States in the forefront?
Well, there's two major things to say about this. First of all, Qatar has been playing a very strategic game. Given its very small physical size in the region, has been playing a position which is beyond its physical capabilities. So they're playing the mediator, they're playing the interlocutor, they're playing the sort of in-between for issues across the world, because they can provide the dialogue, they can provide the actual raw mineral supplies. But as far as it goes with Afghanistan, it really depends on what each player is trying to achieve. And naturally, the U.S. has left Afghanistan, and the Afghanis want to live prosperously, and Qatar and the U.S. are trying to square the circle where they don't want to give aid or help to the Taliban because they're designated as terrorists, but at the same time they don't want the people to suffer. So
Right.
it depends on how much the U.S. is willing to go against its standards in this case.
You know, as someone who lived there for a year, and I've been there on a number of occasions, it is painful to watch the suffering, and I still have friends there that I talk to. Do you think the U.S. has just washed its hands at this point of the whole mess that has become Afghanistan?
I think for the last 20 years, compounded efforts in Afghanistan, again, it depends on who you ask me. If you'd ask me, if you don't have a clear mandate of what you want to do, you're going to keep on putting in money, and not only yourself, but also your allies' lives will be lost. You know, a lot of effort will be put into a situation like this. And I think Biden has said, even during the Obama presidency, that you know there have been futile attempts there. But naturally, you can't just up and leave a place like this and leave it to the country itself to carry on, because with the U.S. leaving, sanctions and restrictions have been put on the country automatically. So there is big-time responsibility from the U.S. and its allies to form some sort of post-departure plan to help the Afghanis as much as they can. Again, treading that tightrope with working with the Taliban at the same time.
Klisman Murati, thank you very much, founder of global research consultancy Pareto Economics. We appreciate your insight.